So, picture this. A man or woman stands in a workshop, sawdust clinging to their noble brow like a crown of honest labor. They're holding a piece of wood, something they've shaped with their own two hands, using tools that have been in the family for generations. But here's the thing. This isn't just a block of maple. It's a cutting board. It's an object of utility and beauty, you know? Now comes the hard part, the part that feels less like poetry and more like a trip to the taxman pricing it. What is this piece of your soul, this slice of a tree's life, actually worth to another person? It's a question that can freeze a woodworker faster than a Minnesota winter, let me tell you. Most folks, when they start selling things they've made, have a simple idea about price. They think, if I make it cheaper, more people will buy it. It seems like common sense, doesn't it? Lower the barrier, and the customers will stampede through the door. We've all been trained to hunt for a bargain, to find the best deal. So, the natural instinct is to calculate your costs, the wood, the sandpaper, the finish, add a little extra for your time, and then maybe knock a few dollars off just to be safe. This line of thinking assumes that the person buying your work is only looking at the number on the tag and nothing else. But I've always suspected there's more to it than that. When you hold a well-made object, you feel its heft, you see the care in the joinery, you appreciate the smooth finish. That feeling has a value all its own. Does a low price honor that feeling, or does it cheapen it? Does it make a customer think they found a hidden gem, or does it make them question the quality of the wood or the skill of the maker? I found myself pondering this very conundrum, and I decided that pondering is fine for poets, but a man with a workshop needs answers. So, I decided to conduct a little experiment. The plan was simple, like a good dovetail joint. I would take the same object and see how the world reacted to it at different price points. It's one thing to have a theory, to sit around a campfire and speculate about the minds of consumers. It's another thing entirely to put your wares on the line and let the people vote with their wallets. This wasn't about finding the most profitable path. Not at first. It was about understanding what goes on in a person's head when they decide to trade their hard-earned money for a piece of your hard work. It was a quest for a certain kind of truth. Here's how we set up this little marketplace showdown. I took one of my signature cutting boards, a handsome, sturdy piece of American black walnut, sanded to a fare thee well and finished with food-safe mineral oil and beeswax. It's a board I'm proud of, the kind of thing you'd be happy to pass down to your children, provided they respect good woodwork. I made a whole batch of them, every single one identical in size, shape, and the quality of its construction. Consistency was key. The only thing that would be different from one board to the next was the little number written on its price tag. This was a science experiment after all, not a flea market. We created 5 distinct listings for this same cutting board on a simple, clean website. There were no fancy descriptions, no marketing mumbo-jumbo, just a good, clear photograph and a price. We set the prices at strategic points. Media group. Grid of 5 identical cutting boards with price tags. $25, $55, $95, $155, $225, close-up of price labels in ascending orderized stock, distribute equally, $25, $55, $95, $155, and a bold $225. This range covered everything from, "Is that all?" to, "Is this thing inlaid with gold?" We wanted to see the full spectrum of customer reaction. We didn't run any ads, offer any discounts, or push any of the listings with promotions. We just put them out there in the digital wilderness and waited to see which ones would attract a buyer through organic discovery. Before we go any further, I want you to take a moment and make a guess. Which one do you think sold the best? Be honest with yourself. The $25 board seems like a surefire winner, a steal that nobody could pass up. Or maybe the high-end $225 board would attract a discerning buyer looking for the absolute best, assuming price equals quality. Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the middle, a safe harbor between the extremes. Go on, pick your horse in this race. This is the part where you get to test your own assumptions about how people shop and what they value. Over the next few weeks, we watched the numbers. We didn't interfere, we didn't nudge, we just observed. It was like being a naturalist in a documentary, watching the creatures of the marketplace in their natural habitat. Every day we would check the sales, noting which price points were getting clicks, which were being added to carts, and most importantly, which ones were actually being purchased. The initial days were quiet, as expected. But then, the first sale came in, and it wasn't for the board I expected. The experiment was officially underway, and it was already teaching us something. The first sale of the experiment was for the $95 cutting board. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but the one right in the middle of our little lineup. I'll admit, I had a quiet chuckle. We're so often told that everyone wants the cheapest option, yet the first person to pull out their wallet chose the one that screamed solid, fair, and reasonable. Over the first week, a pattern began to emerge. We sold a couple more of the $95 boards, and, to my surprise, one of the $155 boards. Meanwhile, the $25 board sat there, gathering digital dust. It was getting plenty of looks, but nobody was buying. As the second week rolled on, the trend became even clearer. The $95 board was the undisputed champion. It was outselling all the other price points combined. The $55 board saw a bit of action, picking up a few sales from folks who were perhaps a little more price conscious but still wanted something substantial. The $155 board continued to get nibbles, suggesting there was a market for a premium product. But the real story was happening at the two ends of the spectrum. The $225 board had zero sales. It was a beautiful thought, but nobody was willing to make that leap. And what about our bargain basement $25 board? It ended the experiment with only a single sale. One. Think about that. The price that should have been the most attractive, the one that offered the most board for the least money, was almost completely ignored. People looked, but they didn't buy. It was as if the low price was a warning sign, not an invitation. They saw $25 and perhaps thought, what's wrong with it? Is it made of balsa wood? Was it finished with motor oil? The low price didn't communicate value. It communicated suspicion. When we finally called an end to the experiment and tallied the results, the numbers were stark. The $95 cutting board was the clear winner in terms of the number of units sold. It hit the sweet spot. It was priced high enough to suggest quality, craftsmanship, and durability, but not so high as to feel extravagant or out of reach for its intended purpose. It felt trustworthy. The $55 and $155 boards performed reasonably well, proving that different customers have different budgets and perceptions of value. But the failure of the $25 board told the most important story of all. What this little experiment demonstrates is a fundamental truth that, honestly, a lot of craftspeople miss. Price is a story. That number on the tag, it's not just a calculation of your costs and the profit you hope to make. It's actually the first and most direct way you communicate the value of your work to someone who might buy it. Before they even get to touch the wood or check out the finish, they're seeing the price, and in that split second, they're already forming an opinion. A price that's too low, well, it can tell a story of desperation, or maybe even questionable materials, or, a maker who doesn't really believe in their own work. It can erode trust before there's ever a chance to connect. Just think about the person who bought the $95 board. They weren't just buying a slab of wood. They were buying the confidence that comes with a fair exchange. They probably saw the price and thought, this seems right. This feels like a price for a real solid cutting board made by someone who knows what they're doing. They weren't after the cheapest option. They were looking for the right option. They wanted something that would last, something they could be proud to have in their kitchen. The price validated that desire. It gave them permission to believe the product was good. On the other hand, consider the internal monologue of the customer who looked at the $25 board and just walked away. They might have been actively looking for a cutting board, ready to buy, but the price gave them pause. Why is it so cheap, they might wonder. The picture looks okay, but for that price, it must be flimsy. It's probably going to warp the first time I wash it. I'll just end up having to buy another one in 6 months. The low price, instead of creating a sale, actually created doubt and friction. It made the customer do the work of questioning the product's quality, and honestly, most people would rather just move on. This is the core lesson for any woodworker, potter, painter, or really any maker out there. You're not just selling an object, you're selling confidence. You're selling the story of quality that you've painstakingly built into the object with your own hands. Your price needs to reflect that story. It should be a firm, honest handshake that says, I made this with care, and I stand by its quality. I believe it is worth this, and I believe you will find it to be worth this too. When you price your work with confidence, you give your customers the confidence to buy it. So, what does this all mean for you, standing there in your own workshop, holding something you've poured your skill and time into? It means you should stop thinking that a lower price is always better. It's honestly time to respect your own work enough to price it appropriately. Don't be afraid to charge what your work is worth. You're not just competing on price with a factory in some far-off land that churns out woodenish objects by the thousand. You're offering something entirely different, a piece of craftsmanship with a human story attached. Your price should signal that difference from a mile away. Now, this doesn't mean you should just pick a high number out of a hat. The success of the $95 price point wasn't an accident. It was a price that lined up perfectly with the perceived value of a high-quality handmade cutting board. Your task is to find that same alignment for your own products. Take a good, honest look at your work. Think about the quality of your materials, the hours of skilled labor you've put in, and the durability and beauty of the finished piece. Then, look at the market and find the price that communicates that value clearly and confidently. Your price should make your ideal customer nod and say, "Yes, that makes sense." The real takeaway here is that you need to shift your perspective. Stop thinking about what is the lowest price you can possibly afford to sell for. Instead, start asking, what is the price that best tells the story of this object's quality and value? Pricing isn't just about covering costs and making a profit. It's honestly the most powerful marketing tool you have. It frames how every potential customer sees your work. A confident price can elevate your product from a simple commodity to a coveted piece of craftsmanship. It helps you attract the right kind of customer, the one who really appreciates what you do. So, I'll leave you with a couple of questions to think about next time you're getting ready to sell your work. If you were the customer, looking at the 5 cutting boards, which price would you have been most drawn to, and why? Does this experiment change how you think about pricing your own creations? Would you have run the test differently? There are no right or wrong answers, but just thinking about them is the first step toward building a more successful and, honestly, a more satisfying life as a maker. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a piece of oak in my shop that's calling my name.